People say life changes in an instant, but they never tell you it starts with a scream. I was refilling the pastry case at Maple and Main Cafe, my little coffee shop tucked in a quiet corner of Savannah, Georgia, when the bell above the door chimed and changed everything. It was a normal Friday morning, jazz humming through the speakers, locals shuffling in for their regular orders, the smell of cinnamon rolls thick in the air. I was halfway through my second latte when a woman walked in, early 30s, trembling, eyes darting like she'd seen a ghost. I greeted her with my usual smile. "Morning. What can I get started for you?" She froze. Her gaze landed on me. And then she screamed. A sharp, guttural sound that cut through the cafe, freezing every conversation mid-sentence. For a second, I thought she was hurt. I ran from behind the counter. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Her face had gone pale. It's you." Everyone was staring. My barista, Tessa, stood motionless by the espresso machine. The woman pointed at me, voice shaking. "Why would you come back here?" I blinked, confused. "I think you have the wrong person." "Don't lie," she screamed again. "You said you were dead." A chill swept through me so fast I could barely breathe. Dead? The cafe fell silent. Even the milk steamer hissed to a stop. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She dropped her purse, trembling as she whispered, "It's really you." "Hannah." That name hit me like a slap. "My name's Clara Bennett," I said quietly. "I don't know any Hannah." But she didn't listen. She turned and bolted out the door, leaving her purse on the floor. For the rest of the morning, I couldn't focus. Every sound, every customer, made me jump. Tessa tried to laugh it off. "Maybe she's crazy," she said. "You know how people are." But I couldn't shake it. The way she'd looked at me like she was seeing someone she'd buried years ago. I finally picked up her purse, hoping to find a phone number or ID. Inside was a driver's license. Name, Megan Carter. Address, Atlanta, Georgia. And tucked behind it, a photo. A smiling woman who looked exactly like me. Same hair, same eyes, same faint scar above the eyebrow. But the woman in the photo was holding a baby and standing beside a man I'd never seen before. My knees nearly gave out. That night, after closing, I couldn't stop staring at the picture. The resemblance wasn't just uncanny, it was exact. Like a mirror into another life. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A stranger screamed at me because she thinks I'm a dead woman? Instead, I looked up the address on her ID. It was 3 hours away. My hands shook as I copied it onto a notepad. When I turned off the cafe lights, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure who was staring back. That night, sleep wouldn't come. And at exactly 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a blocked number. When I answered, a woman's voice whispered through static. "Clara, stop pretending." Then the line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, Megan Carter, and heard that phone call again. "Clara, stop pretending." By sunrise, my hands were trembling as I brewed the first pot of coffee. My mind spun in circles, trying to make sense of it. I'd lived in Savannah my whole life. I'd never even been to Atlanta. So how could there be a woman out there with my face, someone other people thought was dead? When Tessa arrived, she took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think one saw me first," I muttered. Before she could ask what I meant, the cafe door opened. My stomach dropped. It was her. Megan Carter. But this time, she didn't scream. She looked smaller somehow, as if all the fight had drained out of her. Her voice was hoarse. I'm sorry about yesterday," she said. "I just wasn't ready to see you." "Megan," I said carefully, "I'm not who you think I am." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "You can change your name, Hannah, but not your face." I froze. "Hannah?" She gave a small, broken laugh. "That's what you called yourself before you disappeared." Hannah Lake. The name meant nothing to me, but hearing it sent a strange shiver down my spine. It fit in a way I couldn't explain. "I don't know who Hannah is," I said. "My name's Clara Bennett. I've lived here for 9 years. Ask anyone." Megan looked like she wanted to believe me, but couldn't. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. Then how do you explain this? She slid it across the counter. It was an article from 2015. Local woman, 28, presumed dead after house fire in Atlanta suburbs. The headline sat above a photo of me. Same eyes. Same scar above my brow. The article said her name was Hannah Lake, survived by her sister, Megan Carter. I gripped the counter to keep from falling. That's not possible. Megan's voice cracked. They never found your body, Hannah. You were gone before the fire started. The cafe door opened again, a customer this time, breaking the tension. Megan backed away, whispering I shouldn't have come. He might be watching. Who? I asked. But she was already halfway out the door. He knows you're alive. She jumped into her car and sped away before I could move. For the rest of the day, I worked like a robot, smiling, pouring coffee, pretending everything was fine. But my mind replayed her words over and over. He knows you're alive. That night, I pulled out an old shoebox filled with photos and letters, proof of my life. My parents, my college graduation, my first apartment. Everything normal. Everything real. Except one photo I'd never noticed before, at least, not like this. A beach picture from 2016. Me and my friend Julia smiling at the camera. But behind us, blurred by sunlight, stood a man in a black jacket. Watching. I'd never seen him before. My phone buzzed again. Same blocked number. This time I didn't hesitate. Who are you? I demanded. A pause. Then a man's voice, calm and chilling. You can't hide from what you were, Hannah. My blood went cold. Stop calling me that. I shouted. He chuckled softly. You really don't remember, do you? The line crackled, and then came a sound that made my heart stop. A door creaking. Then footsteps. Not through the phone. Behind me. I turned. The back door of the cafe, the one I'd locked hours ago, was open. The sound of that door swinging open froze me in place. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The cafe was empty, chairs stacked, lights dimmed, every shadow suddenly looked alive. Hello. My voice cracked. Nothing. I grabbed the nearest thing that could pass for a weapon, a metal coffee scoop, and inched toward the storage room. The air back there felt colder, the faint smell of rain drifting in from outside. The door was half open, moving slightly with each breath of wind. I pushed it wider and flicked on the light. No one. Just flour bags, milk crates, and the back exit gaping toward the alley. The padlock hung broken on the hinge. Someone had been here. I stepped outside. The alley was slick from drizzle, neon from the diner across the street reflecting off puddles. At the far end, a car engine started a low growl, and a pair of headlights flashed once before fading into the night. I locked the door, shut off the lights, and called Daniel, my neighbor who handled maintenance for the cafe. He came running over, checked the hinges, and shook his head. Looks like somebody popped it with a screwdriver. Probably just a thief. But thieves don't call you by the wrong name at 2 a.m. That night I couldn't go home. I crashed on Tessa's couch instead, still gripping the newspaper clipping Megan had left me. Maybe you should get a DNA test, she joked softly, trying to lighten the mood. Find out if you've got a twin. I smiled weakly. But something about the idea lodged in my mind. What if Megan wasn't crazy? The next morning, I drove to the records office and requested a copy of my birth certificate. The clerk typed for a while, frowning. Clara Bennett, born May 10, 1987, correct? Yes. She hesitated. Your file's sealed. That's usually only done for adoptions or witness protection cases. My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. She shrugged. You'll have to submit a formal request to unseal it. I left the office shaking. Adoption? Witness protection? I'd grown up in foster care until age 10, but my adoption papers had always listed the Bennetts. Still, what if those weren't real either? Back at the cafe, business crawled. Around noon a delivery truck stopped outside, but the driver wasn't the usual guy. This one was older, stocky, with a scar along his jaw. He handed me a clipboard, eyes never leaving mine. You signed for this, Ms. Lake? My pen slipped. It's Bennett. He smiled faintly. Right. Bennett. Then he walked out without the package. I opened it, just an empty cardboard box. Inside, a single Polaroid. Me, taken from across the street that very morning, unlocking the cafe door. My heart slammed. I spun toward the window, but whoever had been there was gone. That evening, I drove to the address on Megan's license. Her house sat on the edge of Atlanta, paint peeling, mailbox hanging crooked. The porch light flickered. "Megan." I called, knocking. No answer. The door creaked open a few inches. Inside, the house was silent except for a ticking clock somewhere deeper in the hallway. I stepped in, my shoes squeaking on the hardwood. "Megan, it's Clara." I moved toward the living room. A coffee mug sat half-finished on the table. A blanket draped over the couch. Everything looked recently used, but empty now. Then I saw it on the floor, a phone buzzing with missed calls from unknown. And beside it, another Polaroid, this one of Megan, taken from behind, as if someone had followed her out the door. My pulse roared in my ears. Before I could pick it up, the phone lit again. Incoming call. No number. I answered, whispering, "Where's Megan?" A man's voice, calm and close. "She shouldn't have told you the truth, Hannah." Then came a faint sound in the background, a door creaking, and Megan's voice, muffled, terrified. "Run." The line went dead. I ran out of Megan's house before I even realized I'd left my bag behind. Her voice still echoed in my ears, that single word, "Run." By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. I sped away from that lonely street like something was chasing me, and maybe it was. When I finally pulled into a gas station miles down the highway, I sat there in the driver's seat, heart hammering, trying to piece everything together. If Megan was right, if I was really Hannah Lake, her dead sister, then who was Clara Bennett? And if the man on the phone had Megan, how long before he came for me? I called the police. They said they'd send someone to check on her house, take a statement. But the way the dispatcher said, "We'll look into it," made my skin crawl. I couldn't just wait. So I did something stupid. I drove back to Atlanta General Hospital, where the article said Megan had been treated after the fire. If anyone remembered Hannah Lake, maybe I'd find answers there. The nurse at records gave me the same polite but firm line. "Patient files that old aren't accessible without family authorization." I leaned closer. "I am family, I think." She studied my face, then her eyes softened. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Like Hannah." My breath caught. "You knew her?" "She came in a few times before the fire. Said she was scared of someone. I don't remember his name, but he wore a badge." "A badge?" My stomach twisted. "Police?" The nurse hesitated, lowering her voice. "He wasn't in uniform. But she said he used to be." Before I could ask more, a voice called from down the hall, "Ma'am, are you Clara Bennett?" A tall man in a dark suit stood by the entrance. No badge, no ID visible. "Yes," I said cautiously. He smiled. "I'm with Atlanta PD, Detective Hale. Could we talk?" He led me outside, where a black sedan idled at the curb. "We found Megan Carter's house like you reported." Door was open, but no sign of her. My chest tightened. "And?" He handed me a small envelope. This was left on her kitchen table. Inside was another photograph, a close-up of me at the hospital entrance, just minutes earlier. On the back, one sentence written in red marker. "You're next, Hannah." I demanded to know who was doing this, but Detective Hale just said, "We're working on it. You should stay somewhere safe tonight." As he turned to leave, I caught the glint of something on his wrist, a bracelet, metal, engraved faintly with a name. E. Crane. I froze. That name was familiar. It was mentioned in the article Megan had shown me, the retired officer questioned in connection with the fire. "Detective," I said carefully, "what does the E stand for?" He smiled thinly. "Elliot." Then he got into his car and drove away. My blood went cold. I spent that night at a cheap roadside motel off Highway 90. I barricaded the door with a chair and sat by the window, every passing car's headlights slicing through the curtains like ghosts. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again, another blocked call. I let it ring twice before answering. "You're persistent," the man said. "Just like before." "Where's Megan?" I demanded. She's safe for now. You should thank me for that. You hurt her, didn't you? A long pause. Then, you both should have stayed dead. The line went dead. The next morning, I packed my things and drove toward Savannah. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt. When I reached the cafe, the front window was shattered. Glass glittered across the sidewalk. And sprayed across the counter in red paint were 3 words that made my knees buckle. Welcome back, Hannah. I stood in the doorway of my cafe, staring at the words painted across the counter. Welcome back, Hannah. The red streaks dripped slowly down the wood, like the message itself was bleeding. My stomach churned. It wasn't just vandalism, it was personal. Whoever had written that knew what Megan had told me. And that meant someone had been watching. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the paint was dry and the man who'd done it was long gone. Tessa rushed in, eyes wide. Clara, what happened? I wanted to tell her everything, the phone calls, Megan, the fire, the man with the bracelet, but something in my gut told me not to. Whoever Elliot Crane was, he had eyes everywhere. The officer dusted for prints, asked a few questions, then left with a hollow promise. We'll be in touch. I swept up glass in silence while Tessa locked the door behind them. When I finally looked up, she was staring at me strangely. You never told me you had a sister. I don't, I said automatically. She frowned. Then why did someone just call asking for Hannah? I felt the air drain from the room. Who called? A man. Said you'd know who it was. His exact words were, tell Hannah the fire didn't finish the job. My hands started shaking so hard I dropped the broom. That night, I packed a small bag, locked up the cafe, and drove straight to the Savannah Public Records office. If my birth certificate was sealed, maybe I could find something else, anything, to tell me who I really was. Most of the archives were digital now, but there was still a backroom of microfilm files and paper ledgers. The clerk let me search through the B section. Nothing under Bennett. Then I checked L. There it was. Lake, Hannah Marie. Born May 10th, 1987. My birthday. The file listed parents named Eleanor and Peter Lake, names I'd never heard before. But scribbled at the bottom, in red pen, was a handwritten note. Adopted. Records sealed under witness protection. Case ref. Crane 2015. My knees nearly gave out. The door creaked behind me. A shadow moved across the wall. Find what you were looking for? It was him. Elliot Crane. He looked older than in the photos Megan had shown me, hair grayer, face harder, but those eyes were the same. Sharp, steady, certain. What do you want from me? I asked. He smiled faintly. The truth. I don't even know who you are. He stepped closer, his tone calm, almost kind. You knew once. You testified against me, Hannah. Your statement cost me my badge, my career, everything. I'm not Hannah. I shouted. He tilted his head. Then why did the system protect you under that name? I didn't have an answer. My mind raced. The sealed records. The false adoption. The fire. He took another step forward. You weren't supposed to survive that night. But fate, he smirked, is sentimental. My hand closed around the only thing within reach, a metal filing rod. Where's Megan? He sighed. You always were too loyal for your own good. Before I could move, the building's lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I turned toward the doorway, but he was already gone. I ran outside into the street, gasping for air. My phone buzzed. A new message. It was a video. I pressed play. The image shook, grainy and dark. Megan sat in a chair, wrists bound, eyes red from crying. Behind her, a fire glowed faintly, flickering like it had years ago. Then Elliot's voice. The fire took one sister. Let's see if it takes the other. The camera tilted down to a match in his hand. The screen went black. The video ended, but the sound of that match scraping stayed in my head long after the screen went dark. I stared at my phone, shaking, replaying the final frame again and again. Megan tied to a chair, a flicker of orange behind her, the faintest reflection of him in the firelight. Elliot Crane. A man I couldn't remember but who seemed to know everything about me. I called the police, begged them to trace the number. They said they'd escalate it to cybercrimes. These things take time, the operator said. But I didn't have time. So I made a choice. If no one else could find Megan, I would. I went home long enough to grab a flashlight, a first aid kit, and the one photo Megan had left behind, the one of her and me together before the fire. I didn't recognize the house in the background, but the peeling green shutters and porch railing looked familiar somehow. I searched property records online until I found it, a foreclosed house 20 miles west of Atlanta, the old Lake family home. The address from the article. That's where it had all started. And I had a feeling that's where Elliot wanted it to end. By the time I reached the property, night had settled like a blanket over the trees. The house stood silent, black against the pale light of the moon. The smell of smoke still clung to the air, as if the fire never really left. The porch groaned beneath my feet. I pushed the door open. Inside, the walls were charred, ceilings half collapsed. Dust floated through my flashlight beam like ash. Every step echoed. Megan. I called softly. No answer. Then a sound from deeper inside. A soft cough. A whimper. I followed it through the hall, past a burned-out kitchen and into what must have been the living room. There, beneath a half-broken beam, I saw her. Megan. She was tied to a chair, but alive, barely conscious. I rushed to her, cutting through the ropes with shaking hands. Her eyes fluttered open. Hannah, she whispered. It's Clara, I said. We're getting you out. She tried to shake her head. He's still here. The words had barely left her lips when a voice echoed from behind me. Always so predictable. I spun. Elliot stood by the doorway, gun in hand, his face calm as ever. I didn't want this to end in violence, he said. But you never learn. Why? I demanded. Why destroy everything? He tilted his head. Because you lied. You swore in court that I set the fire that killed your parents. You ruined me, Hannah. And for what? To hide your own guilt. My guilt? I could barely breathe. I was 10 years old. He stepped closer, eyes burning. You started that fire, not me. I found you that night. I tried to pull your sister out, but you ran. Then they blamed me. His voice softened, almost pitying. And the government gave you a new name, a new life. But you can't bury fire. It always finds air again. Behind me, Megan stirred. He's lying, she rasped. You saved me, Hannah. You tried to pull me out. Elliot's face twitched. That's not how I remember it. He raised the gun. And in that instant, the memory hit me like smoke filling my lungs the night of the fire, the heat, the screaming. I'd been carrying a lantern to the porch, tripped on the stairs. It had shattered. Flames had spread fast, swallowing the curtains, the walls, everything. I'd tried to save Megan. He tried to save me. But when the sirens came, I was gone. They thought I'd died. He'd been blamed for the blaze that took my parents. And somehow, that guilt had burned him hollow. Elliot, I said quietly, stepping forward, I remember. He hesitated, the barrel trembling slightly. Then you know why this has to end. I shook my head. No. It already ended 10 years ago. The sirens cut through the night, red and blue lights flashing through the cracked windows. Elliot looked toward the sound, then back at me, his face crumpling, tired, defeated. Some fires don't go out, he whispered. He dropped the gun. Police burst through the doorway seconds later, shouting commands. They pulled him to the ground while medics rushed to Megan. I stood there frozen, watching as the man who'd haunted my life disappeared into the flashing lights. Outside, as the paramedics loaded Megan into the ambulance, she grabbed my hand. You remember now? I nodded, tears blurring everything. Enough to know who I really am. She smiled faintly. Then it's over, Hannah. I took a deep breath. No, it's starting over. The weeks after Elliot Crane's arrest passed in a blur of paperwork, statements, and sleepless nights. Every morning, I woke up half expecting another phone call, another whisper in the dark. But it never came. The silence felt strange, heavy, but clean. Megan stayed in the hospital for a while, recovering from smoke inhalation and shock. I visited her every day. The first time I walked in, she smiled faintly and said, "You look like you again." Maybe she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be anyone. Not Clara. Not Hannah. Just me, whoever that finally was. Elliot pled guilty to kidnapping, arson, and attempted murder. The trial lasted only a week. When I took the stand, his eyes never left mine. He didn't argue, didn't beg. When the verdict was read, he just nodded, like he'd been waiting for it all along. The papers called him the disgraced ex-officer turned arsonist. But to me, he was something else entirely, a man trapped in his own version of the past, unable to escape the fire we both started. I'll never forget what he said before they took him away. Every fire dies, Hannah. But the smoke always lingers. He was right. Some part of it still does. After the trial, I stood outside the old lake house one last time. The city had ordered it demolished, but before the machines came, I wanted to see it in daylight. The charred walls were covered in ivy now. The air smelled of pine and rain instead of ash. And through a broken window, sunlight spilled across the blackened floorboards, soft and golden. It didn't look haunted anymore. It looked peaceful. I knelt by what used to be the front steps and placed the photograph I'd carried since that day, me and Megan as children, smiling in front of that very house. Goodbye, I whispered. Not to the house. To Hannah. Back in Savannah, life slowly began again. I reopened Maple and Main Cafe, repainted the walls, replaced the window, changed the playlist to something lighter. On the first day back, Tessa hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're sure you're okay?" she asked. I smiled. Better than okay. We poured coffee for regulars, joked with customers, and for the first time in months, the laughter didn't feel forced. Late that afternoon, the bell above the door chimed. Megan walked in healthier, smiling, carrying a small box. "For you," she said, handing it over. Inside was a necklace, silver, simple, engraved with one word, Hannah. "It's who you were," she said softly. "But you get to choose who you are now." I closed my fingers around it. Then I'd choose both. That night, as the sun dipped low over Savannah and the street outside glowed gold, I sat by the cafe window with a cup of tea. For a long time, I'd run from my past, terrified of what it might reveal. But the truth wasn't a monster hiding in the dark, it was a child who'd survived when she wasn't supposed to. I thought about Elliot's final words, about smoke that lingers. He was right, but smoke isn't forever. Eventually, it fades, and what's left is just air and light. I looked out at the fading sky and whispered, "My name is Hannah Lake. And I'm fine."